Hey, what's going on? All right, welcome back to another video. Hopefully you're in school, but if you're not, if you have to quarantine or you're at home for whatever reason, it's almost like you're in the class, right? So yesterday, hopefully you were in class. We watched that 12-minute video about the tragic life of Maya Angelou. So today, I would like you to rewatch that. I'll put that on the big screen, and we can all watch it together. Or if you want to, put on some headphones or whatever, AirPods, do your thing. Now, there is going to be a Google form that goes along with just Maya Angelou. So nothing about I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, not yet. So we will be reading excerpts from her autobiography, one of her many autobiographies. So that's actually the first question, I think, on the Google form is what is an excerpt? So you'll hear your English teachers in high school use this quite often. I mean, I'm using it right now. So let's say I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings is 250 pages. I think it's about that. We're only going to be reading a page or two. So that's an excerpt. It's when you just don't read the whole thing. That might take us all year. I'm pretty sure there are some college classes where you might read I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings like the whole semester, or you might focus on a couple works by Maya Angelou. We don't have that kind of time. So we're just going to get a taste. We're going to get a little glimpse as to what I Know What the Cage Bird Sings is like. And there's a reason we're not reading the whole thing. We'll get to that later. But it's actually, I guess, been banned. And after watching the video yesterday, it deals with some pretty heavy topics. So there's that. But I would like to share a couple things that were mentioned in the movie or the video with you, a couple new things. And you can have that Google form right out and do it as you're watching the stuff. So question number one, what is an excerpt? So a couple other things that I think are sort of important and that are on the Google form. Remember, in this class, I'll never ask you to memorize anything. I don't think there's a lot of value in that. So that's why as you're watching this, hopefully you're filling this out. But the next couple questions are going to be a little bit about when she was born and when she died. And I think that's important to know just so it gives you a reference of, okay, during what time period did she live? Because if she had lived in like the 1860s, that would have been a lot different in this country. 1860s, like the Civil War is going on. She didn't live in that time. We'll see. But she was born in 1928. I'm sure you can see that right there. And if they want to just boil her life down to two words, it could be poet, although we're going to read something that's not poetry by her, which she was a writer as well. Poet and activist. Now, when you're talking about activist, you're talking about someone who wants change in the world. So based on what you watched yesterday, based on when she lived from 1928 to 2014, some of the people that she worked with, like Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So if you know anything about that sort of history, the thing that she probably wanted to change, and we actually, I think, have a quote by her about change, would probably be the lives of people who were Black in the United States, but not just the United States. If you remember yesterday, she was very involved in something called apartheid, which I mentioned in a couple classes. South Africa. So think about the continent of Africa. And then all the way to the south, there's a country like right at the bottom of Africa called South Africa. And until 1992, I think, it was legal. It was mandatory to keep people who were Black and white separate. It was legal. It was the law. And you can imagine there's actually one famous guy. His name's Trevor Noah. He's on late night TV. I don't really watch him too much, but he lived in apartheid during apartheid. He lived in South Africa during apartheid. And guess what? His dad was white and his mom was black. So the name of his autobiography, we're not talking about him right now, but was Born a Crime. He was literally illegal. Yeah, it was a crazy story. If you want to read a good autobiography, I recommend it. Trevor Noah, Born a Crime, it's called. I didn't plan on talking about that, but Maya Angelou did do a lot of good work with raising awareness around the world about apartheid. And if you've ever heard of that guy, Nelson Mandela, he was jailed for being so active in that raising awareness around the world about apartheid. So he eventually became South Africa's president. But we're not talking about apartheid or Nelson Mandela, so let's move on to Maya Angelou. Another thing that is interesting about her is right here. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, but she was the first Black San Francisco cable car conductor. There's a little piece on her that we'll be talking about later. But I mean, out of all the things that she did, actress, singer, poet, writer, activist, she was also the first Black San Francisco cable car conductor. Yeah, a little more on that later. You saw this yesterday, recited a poem at Clinton's inauguration. I had no idea she published cookbooks. What? And if you watched yesterday's video, and we'll watch it again today, she did spend 5 years in silence. So, but this is the quote I was talking about earlier. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. And I walked in this morning, talk a little bit about my attitude. Walked in this morning, it's freezing in my room. You can tell I'm wearing a jacket. It's still freezing in this room. There's something blowing out of the vent, but I can't even find it, but I think it's actually cold air. So I can't change it. Like ever since I started working in the school, I've had 2 different rooms, and sometimes it'll be super chilly. Sometimes it'll be super hot. They're like, yeah, it's kind of an old building. There's nothing we can do. So I don't get mad. I just wear a jacket or I just sweat. But usually it's a jacket in this room. And I'm sure you probably feel it worse because you leave this room and you might go to Mr. Lutik's room and it's just like dying in there. So back to that quote. It's a good quote, I think. Like, let me make it a little bigger. Let me actually put it on the screen. If you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude. All right, I need to switch screens here, and we'll share this screen right here. All right, a lot of ads here, but don't buy the products. It's all good. So here are 11 facts about the book, her autobiography, that we'll be reading. Remember, autobiography. We talked about that in some classes. Auto means yourself, like automobile. Like all you have to do is push the pedal and it will go by itself. You don't have to push the car. Auto. Bio means life. Graph means writing. So an autobiography is a book written about someone that they wrote themselves. So I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is an autobiography about Maya Angelou. And here are some facts. Scroll down. Some of these we won't be focusing on because they are in the, look at this, all these ads, because they are in the movie that we watched. But Maya Angelou wrote 7 autobiographies. And, there's some really hot topics that are often hard to talk about right there. Came out in 1969, right here. Can I highlight this? I hope I can. It was one of the first books to honestly depict the experiences of a Black woman growing up in the South. So that story had not been told a lot. And in a minute, we're going to talk about how, or maybe I'll talk about it right now, how people who published books thought, you know what? Nobody's going to want to hear a story about a black woman living in the South. That's just not going to sell. So she was the first one to get that book published. And guess what? It did sell. And we were kind of dealing with that a couple of years ago. That I think before Black Panther, a lot of people were like, I just don't think a black superhero would sell. People aren't going to go, to the movies and watch a black superhero. And guess what? It was like the most watched movie, made the most money of that year. What was it? 2018. So yeah, guess what? We're still dealing with that. Like, nobody's going to watch that. Well, guess what? They did, and they will. We talked about the next one right there. She was mute for 5 years after a sexual assault. That is in the movie. Number 2, I'm not going to focus that much on this, but James Baldwin is another very famous writer. He wrote The Invisible Man. And oftentimes it's who you know that will actually help you get a little further in life. So she was able to meet some very powerful people, and that really helped her with getting her book published. I wouldn't recommend this, especially because you're not 21, but apparently, since I've already read this, apparently part of her writing ritual, like when she wrote, she would often play cards. She would play solitaire while she was like taking a break. And she was also drinking a little bit of alcohol, which I cannot recommend. You should not do that, especially since you're under 21. The next one, if I can get down here. Yeah, the next one, I do want to focus on this, okay? And there will be some questions on the Google form. Alert, here's one. So let me make this bigger. So the title of her book came from a poem. And they have an excerpt of the poem right here, along with an ad. Let's get rid of that. So I've highlighted this. I probably will not read the whole thing, but in that poem, there is a line that says, "I know why the caged bird sings. Ah, me, with his wing, when his wing is bruised and his bosom sore, when he beats his bars and would be free." It is not a carol, so it's not a song of joy or glee, but a prayer that he sends from his heart's deep core. Okay, so this is a little deep right here, a little deep, but her autobiography is not about birds and it's not about cages. You can imagine if it is about racism, the bird could be her. And the cage, it's all metaphor, not really a bird, not really a cage. It's all about how the racism she has felt. Remember, she lived in the South for a while, I believe in the 1930s and 40s, in Arkansas. So she experienced a lot of racism. So the cage might be that racism keeping her down, keeping her from flourishing, keeping her from being the person that we know that she will become. But growing up, she probably felt like held down by all of the laws that were against her. So if you're living in the 30s and 40s and you're black and it's the South, you're going to probably be going to a school that's not as good as all of the white children who are going where they're going. So think about that. That's going to be definitely on the Google form. Not a bird, not a cage. What is it? Okay. The next one. Is this something we want to talk about? Oh, yeah. This is just kind of an interesting fact, I thought, for me. Like, out of all the things that she did, I guess you could probably watch this on YouTube. A lot of times when I click these things, it says it's not available. Oh, OWN. That is Oprah's network. Can we click on this? Maybe we can watch it. Yeah. I haven't watched this, but I would like to show you a picture of a streetcar if they do it. Maybe she's just talking about it. But very famous streetcars, San Francisco. Well, there's a streetcar. Well, that's what it looks like. That's a streetcar. And she was the first, was it black female streetcar conductor in San Francisco? What are the odds? So she's made history there, but then she also made a lot of other history, of course. Number 6. We've talked about this already. Cage Bird, Assumptions, books about black women didn't sell. Well, I'll show you. Yes, it will sell right here, right there. It sold, and it paved the way. I don't know how to say this woman's name, but it paved the way for Alice Walker, Toni Morrison. If you look them up, they've sold tons and tons of books. This was also in the video yesterday. She read a poem, 1993, at Bill Clinton's inauguration, and it increased the book sales 500%. So think of it as like 5 times. So whatever they were selling, if they were selling 1,000 a week, they were now selling 5,000 a week. I just made that up. Angelou. Okay, the next one, skip number 8. Number 9, though. Cage Bird, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, is frequently banned or censored. So, like I said, we're just reading an excerpt, but there are a lot of things in that book that she goes into detail. Like we've talked about them on the surface, but she goes into more detail that we won't go into here. But a lot of parental groups will get angry at the school if they read the whole thing because, it's just not appropriate maybe to read out loud, but it's important to know. I mean, she tells her story and other people might have struggled with the same thing. So the banned book thing is always really tricky for me. Like, I agree, there are some things, in a class, maybe 8th graders shouldn't read, or some people, it's usually banned in high school, but it's just, it's something that, if you don't talk about it a lot of times, you're doomed to repeat it, or you might think you're alone. So she's been called the most banned author in the U.S. Ooh, she's a rebel. And catalyst. We had the word kindling not too long ago, but a catalyst is a term for something that can make something else happen. So maybe like not start a real fire, but start a lot of controversy. So the book, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, kind of started Banned Book Week. And if you look here, Banned Books Week right there, it's a whole week designed to raise awareness of books that have been banned for whatever reason. Sometimes, I'll talk about it right now, when we get to the excerpt of that book, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, there is exactly one word at least that I'm not going to be comfortable saying out loud. And I'll talk about why. It will be on the screen when I read it, but I won't say it out loud because it's very similar to another word that should never be uttered, but we'll get to that at the time. So hopefully your Google form has been filled out a little bit. Hopefully you know a little bit more about Maya Angelou, and hopefully it wasn't that bad. Hopefully it wasn't that hard.